Welcome to a casual Friday edition of Red Meat. I'm Jim Geraghty, along with Mark Hemingway as usual. And we are in the middle of these stimulus wars, not far from where we're sitting up on Capitol Hill. As of this taping, it looks like it's probably going to pass maybe 3, maybe 4 or 5 Republicans, a majority of the Democrats, but maybe a few stragglers in there. Mark, you've been following this from the beginning. Just your first sense of what's likely to come out as this process continues.
Well, I'm feeling stimulated already, Jim. I don't know. It's very hard to say what's going to happen here. I mean, just procedurally, it looks like, as you say, there's probably at least 3 Republicans. They're going to hammer out some sort of compromise with the Democrats, provide them with political cover. They're gonna put in for a cloture vote this afternoon. Probably have a cloture vote Sunday and a final vote on Monday, and that will be that.
Right. But that's going to be this version. They still have to go to conference, which would be early next week. Are they thinking? Or?
I'm not 100% sure on that, but they're looking at a final vote Monday. It looks like they're basically shut things down. They're going to offer basically one big last final amendment that they hammer out in the compromise with these squishy Republicans, and the rest is, as they say, history.
Yeah. My thinking is, as we look at this, I'm hearing my readers are not happy. Corner readers are not happy. I'm left with the sense, though, that this isn't the worst-case scenario, and that if you're a conservative, if you're a Republican, ideally you'd like to have a great stimulus, which was full of tax cuts and maybe some infrastructure spending, some of the stuff that really is going to build genuine improvements and not just go to replace the guardrails on Maryland highways or something. But short of that, if you're going to have a lousy bill, at the very least have it being all Democrat, and the next best thing to having it all Democrat would be all Democrat and Snow, Collins, and Arlen Specter. Yeah. Right? I mean, and that might get Pat Toomey into the race. So, let's add a little bonus there. But in other words, if my guess is that if that scenario comes to pass, this really basically says, all right, as of February 15th or 16th or whenever Obama has his bill signing ceremony, President Obama, it is your economy.
No, that's absolutely true. And unless things turn around, fairly impressively before the elections get heavily underway in 2010. It could be a real albatross around the neck of not just Obama, but the entire party. I mean, if the economy is bad enough, you could literally see like a 1994 type change, because you're right. It's all going to come back down to Obama. It's going to be laid at Obama's feet. The stimulus bill, which a lot of people were skeptical of to begin with, and more to the point, in a close political environment, the independents seem to be breaking pretty strongly against it. Yeah. So it is kind of a recipe for disaster in that sense.
Yeah, both the polling and I think you could say just the tone of Reid and Obama and Pelosi are all kind of indicating that time is not on their side. The more public looks at this, they look at the Blagojevich power plant proposal, which you spotlighted. If you haven't checked out it, scroll down the screen you're on right now. Last night in the corner, Mark had a fantastic post on that. $600 million digital TV coupons.
That's exactly it. The more sunlight they expose this thing, the more it starts to, stink. So it's a real problem for them, particularly because you're going to be going into next week. They're going to be talking about TARP 2, which is another $500 billion on top of the $800 billion they're talking about spending here. If the Republicans could somehow, I honestly don't, know what way possibly to do this, drag this out into next week past Monday, not with Democrats control the news cycle, and, start letting TARP 2 gather a little momentum, then, who knows, maybe they do have a shot at stopping this thing in its current form, or at least whittling it down to a slightly more reasonable, actually, genuinely stimulative bill.
Yeah, and this kind of, gets into the sense that it seems like in the last day or two, the Obama and I guess Reid defense has been basically a big lie strategy of saying, look, the only thing Republicans want is all tax cuts. Now, 30-some Republicans voted for the McConnell proposal to guarantee mortgages for people. Yeah. I have there are a whole bunch of conservatives who have some problems with that. I know that Michelle Malkin is lighting the torches and gathering the pitchforks. But, there are some people who think that's a better idea. Look, whether you like it or you hate it, that's not a tax cut. No. That's a different, proposal altogether. So in other words, the Obama response has got to be to convince people the Republican position isn't what the Republican position is.
Yeah. Well, I think the deal is here is, you have to look at the cost of the overall bill. This one Blagojevich earmark is $2 billion. That's a hefty chunk of an $800 billion bill. How many other pet projects like that are in there? How many other, spending could you gather up and strip out of there? I mean, if you actually took the actual stimulative spending, even if you don't necessarily buy into the Keynesian economic theory behind the thing, and just said, these are projects that are being put forward in good faith, purely as stimulative measures, I imagine you get the majority of Republicans on board. The problem is the bill would probably be at least half the size that it is now, or less, and it wouldn't be all the pork barrel spending that the Democrats want out of it.
I was going to say, check out the list by Stephen Sporell and Kevin Williamson,
Yes.
just detailing all kinds of stuff in there. But kind of a closing thought to kind of wrap up on, because this has been a major week for the Obama administration. Everyone's kind of left shaking their heads. You were joking earlier, we learned that he's human. What did we learn about Obama this week?
Well, what we learned here is that there's a big downside to electing a guy who has the least amount of executive experience of any chief executive of the United States in perhaps arguably the whole history of the country. I mean, everything you're seeing here that we're seeing Obama break down on, communicating to the American people about why we need this stimulus package, consensus building, handling personnel. I mean, these are all the hallmarks of a good chief executive that knows how to do those things. Mm-hmm. And he's just floundering. I mean, just the flop sweat is visible. His speech to the Democratic retreat, just even the New York Times said he looked, quote, irritated. I mean, this is, his vaunted temperament is not exactly winning the day here.
Yeah, it's interesting that very early on in this process, a decision was basically made to allow Pelosi and, House appropriators borderline free reign in setting this up.
Yeah.
Now, early on in the process, the people complained about the sod for the mall. He took it out. People complained about the funding for family planning. He took it out. Or at least he was calling Democratic lawmakers and saying that they should take it out. Somewhere along the line, I guess he decided he was going to take out 3 items, and then these things were off the table. And if you think $600 million for digital TV coupons is a bad idea, he's not interested in listening to that. He's still saying comments like, the stimulus can be improved, but it has to be passed now.
Yeah.
Like, there's kind of a contradiction there. And so I'm kind of left thinking, is it just that he wants a big bill passed and he doesn't really care what's in it?
Well, I think the bottom line is that looking at the polling, I mean, the more this sits out there, the more that it's public support craters, the more people learn about these, crazy $2 billion Blagojevich provisions and things like that. And there's a lot to dislike in this bill. So the problem is that, if you're going to whittle down the bill, you're going to have to spend a lot of time fighting over a lot of different individual amendments, and that's going to take time, And all it could take is another week or two of debating this, which, 2 to 3 weeks of debate on a $1 trillion bill doesn't exactly seem like it's unreasonable in the grand scheme of things. But the fact of the matter is they can't let that happen, because if they do, it'll never pass. Yeah. So that's exactly what happened. I think he realized that the only way to get it passed was to just simply railroad it through and scare people in the process.
See, I'm left, and there's two, I guess you could say that the conclusion as we wrap up this week is that the Democrats and Obama are taking a massive gamble.
Yep.
I'm not surprised that they're betting our future and our children's future on a massive spending bill. I'm more surprised they're betting their own political future. I mean, that's,
well, it's not,
in a way, that's kind of a bigger risk.
It's not just their own political future, it's their own future policy goals. I mean, I don't see a situation here where, this necessarily benefits the Democrats. I mean, if you look at, their long-term and medium-term policy goals, I mean, how are you going to pay for things like universal health care and all these other things when you're blowing $1.3 billion in the span of 2 weeks or whatever between TARP 2 and this? It seems like it's just going to put a real damper on any future spending they want to do, and more than that, Republicans use it as a cudgel against them every time they bring up new spending.
A Republican cudgel and a future impediment to future Democratic spending. Mark, I don't know about you, I'm loving the Obama administration so far. This has been great. So,
well, at least we're not defending Bush anymore, right?
I was going to say, actually, I said this to my friend last night. Kind of feels good to be in opposition again. Just whacking away. So, we're going to be continuing doing our part over here on Red Meat. I hope you guys at home are. Keep tuned to The Corner for constant updates on how the stimulus fight is going on. For Mark Hemingway, I'm Jim Geraghty. Thanks very much for watching.